Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that what for years had remained confined to voices, suspicions, and ancient prophecies now takes shape in a precise and concrete announcement. It's no longer about generic warnings, nor about admonitions that get lost in the echo of centuries. Today there is a date, clear and definitive, capable of marking the boundary between what has been and what will come. And along with that date comes a sharp order, without compromise, to immediately leave certain cities. The history of humanity has always been accompanied by warnings and omens, but rarely have these transformed into such detailed and unequivocal indications. Now we're not talking about possibilities, but about certainty. Time has stopped being an abstract concept and has transformed into a deadline. There's no room left for indifference, because the line that separates normality from the irreversible has been drawn. The chosen cities are not chosen by chance. It's not a matter of geographical randomness, but of places that represent nerve centers of power, history, and modernity. Cities have always been the beating hearts of civilization. Here masses concentrate, collective destinies are written, and human dreams and fears are consumed. At the same time, cities are precisely the most vulnerable, exposed to sudden collapse when equilibrium breaks. Where lights shine, where noise never stops, sudden silence can fall like a heavy curtain, transforming daily life into a sudden desert. Such a clear order, pronounced without hesitation, leaves no room for interpretation. It's an invitation to survival, an urgent call to perform a radical act, abandoning the known to take refuge in the uncertain. The logic of habit pushes us to stay, but the force of the message compels us to look beyond appearances and recognize that the time for delayed choices has ended. History is full of peoples who have underestimated the signs. Ancient writings, seers, and handed-down traditions have often warned in advance of what then manifested with brutality. Countless times, men have ignored voices that invited them to flee, and always, when the storm arrived, regret took the place of hope. What makes this moment different today is the clarity. No longer indefinite words, but a date carved with precision, and a command that leaves no escape. It's not about feeding fear, but about awakening awareness. It's not alarmism, but urgency. The words that have been spoken don't just describe a warning, but an act of responsibility toward those who want to understand and prepare. It's the possibility of choosing life before history imposes too high a price. What is happening no longer belongs to the realm of hypotheses. The date has been announced, the appeal has been launched, and the consequences are approaching inexorably. All that remains is to accept the truth of this time, because the future has stopped being a distant line and has transformed into an imminent threshold. The moment to act is now, before the world finds itself overwhelmed by what can no longer be stopped. When such an announcement is pronounced with such clarity, it's never accidental. The indication to leave certain cities carries with it deep motivations, rooted not only in geography, but also in history and the spiritual dimension. Each chosen city represents a node, a symbol, a place that concentrates fragilities and powers, greatness and weaknesses. And precisely for this reason, it becomes the point where the storm gathers and prepares to strike. Modern cities are enormous containers of life, but also places where vulnerability is hidden behind apparent solidity. Just observe the fragility of their structures. A sudden interruption of electrical energy, a collapse of computer systems, a blockage in essential supplies like water and food, and within a few hours, what seemed orderly transforms into chaos. In large urban centers, millions of people depend on external resources that arrive every day. One flaw in the chain, and the city becomes a prison, a concrete labyrinth that turns into a trap. The motivations that push us to leave certain cities are therefore intertwined with three great dimensions: material fragility, geopolitical instability, and spiritual darkness. Material fragility. Contemporary metropolises live in precarious equilibrium. Skyscrapers, crowded streets, fast transportation, lights, and constant connections give the illusion of absolute control. Yet behind that illusion hides an extreme dependence on systems that can collapse from one moment to the next. Imagine New York, Paris, Tokyo, or London. Splendid cities, symbols of modernity, but also heavily exposed to energy crises, blackouts, cyber attacks, or natural catastrophes. Anyone who lives there knows that just one day without electricity or water is enough to bring millions of people to their knees. Getting out in time means not being trapped when the collapse arrives. Geopolitical instability. Many of the cities named in prophetic announcements are epicenters of political and economic power. Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Brussels, Rome, capitals where global decisions are made, but also natural targets in times of conflicts and tensions. When history accelerates and nations confront each other on a razor's edge, these cities become critical points, places vulnerable to attacks, centers too exposed. Staying would mean risking being overwhelmed by the first waves of a clash that shows no mercy to anyone. Spiritual darkness. Then there's a more subtle but no less powerful motivation. Many cities have become symbols of moral confusion and loss of values. Where power and wealth dominate, the spirit weakens. It's no coincidence that in ancient prophecies they spoke of Babylon as a symbol of collapse, not only political but also spiritual. Today, Babylon manifests in places where the cult of appearance, money, and domination has taken the place of faith, solidarity, and authentic life. Leaving these cities doesn't just mean fleeing from physical danger, but also freeing oneself from a corrupted atmosphere that drags one downward. The list of cities to abandon is striking because it touches both East and West, both symbols of the past and centers of modernity. New York, financial capital of the world, is one of the first. Its luminous beauty, which illuminates nights with infinite skyscrapers, hides immense vulnerability. A targeted attack on its energy infrastructure would be enough to paralyze it. Rome, heart of Christianity, carries within itself a spiritual mission, but also the weight of struggles, tensions, and internal fragilities. Jerusalem, sacred city, continues to be at the center of conflicts that never cease, making it a symbol of tension that will sooner or later explode. And still more, Tokyo, symbol of advanced technology, built however on fragile land, continuously threatened by earthquakes and natural instability. Moscow and Beijing, nerve centers of world power, destined to be targets in every war scenario. Brussels, capital of political Europe, too close to tensions that cross the continent. The reason for this announcement is clear. No great city will be spared from the repercussions of what is coming. There's no room for the illusion that a center of power, wealth, or culture can guarantee protection. On the contrary, it's precisely these places that attract the first waves of change. Leaving means having the courage to recognize reality. It means renouncing what appears stable, but which in reality is already on the brink of collapse. It's an act of lucidity, not weakness. Because those who remain clinging to what is collapsing will inevitably end up overwhelmed by its ruins. The message that repeats itself forcefully is always the same. Salvation is not found in places of power, but in hidden places, far from the clamor. Not in the noisy centers of metropolises, but in silent zones where man can return to being free, in contact with nature and with God. This is why the announcement was pronounced so clearly. Leave these cities now, not tomorrow, not when the signs become more evident, now, because those who wait for the last moment will discover that the exit will already be blocked. The date that has been announced is not one among many, but a precise day that carries with it a strong sign. It's December 21st, the winter solstice, a moment when civilizations have always recognized a symbolic boundary between death and rebirth, between the longest night and the waiting for light that returns. It's not a random choice, but a call that has roots in ancient traditions, prophecies, and revelations that speak of a time when heaven and earth meet to initiate an irreversible passage. December 21st has been repeatedly indicated as a date of transformation. It's not just an astronomical phenomenon, but an energetic and spiritual crossroads. On that day, all of nature enters into deep silence, almost into a suspension that prepares for a new cycle. Not by chance did ancient cultures from Mesoamerican peoples to ancient Romans attribute sacred meanings to the solstice and often connected it to cosmic events of rupture. Today, that ancient wisdom intertwines with prophetic announcements. December 21st marks the moment when what had been promised begins to manifest in a visible way. The reason why this date was chosen is twofold. On one side, natural and cosmic. on the other spiritual and prophetic. On the natural plane, humanity finds itself in a period of extreme vulnerability. Technological and urban systems are already at the limit. Geopolitical tensions have reached an alarm level, and the fragility of great cities is evident to everyone. On the spiritual plane, instead, December 21st represents the point of no return. Revelations speak of a purification that must occur, and like every purification, it begins from the heart of the most corrupted, most fragile, most exposed places. It's not an announcement made to frighten, but to prepare. The date has been made known to give time, to invite people to leave the cities before the inevitable happens. Those who wait for the last moment will find themselves facing blocked roads, collapsed systems, and desperate crowds that will no longer have a way out. For this reason, the message is clear. Don't wait for the evident sign. Don't seek confirmations when it will already be too late. December 21st marks the beginning of a change that will leave no great city indifferent. The reason is not only material destruction, but the necessity of bringing man out from the noise, from artificial lights, from the heart of Babylon, to lead him back to a purer and quieter place, where he can begin again. The date is the seal of a new time that opens, and leaving the cities doesn't mean fleeing, but choosing life.